The flight that changed everything. Lisa Thompson was used to getting what she wanted. As a wealthy business executive, she spent her days managing high-end real estate deals and her nights dining at exclusive restaurants. She had little patience for inconvenience and an even shorter temper for anything that disrupted her carefully curated life. One rainy afternoon, Lisa found herself boarding a flight from New York to Los Angeles. She had paid extra for a first-class ticket, expecting nothing less than a seamless, luxurious experience. She carried herself with an air of superiority, flipping through her phone as she made her way down the jet bridge. As she reached her seat, her eyes narrowed in displeasure. Sitting next to her was a man in uniform, a soldier. His military fatigues were slightly wrinkled, and his boots looked worn from miles of marching. He sat quietly, hands folded, staring straight ahead. Lisa wrinkled her nose. "Oh, great," she muttered under her breath. She wasn't subtle. The soldier, whose name was Sergeant Daniel Harper, heard her, but he chose to ignore it. He was used to people having mixed reactions to the military. Instead, he offered a polite nod and adjusted his seatbelt. Lisa sat down with an exaggerated sigh. Not long after takeoff, she signaled for the flight attendant. "Excuse me," Lisa said, her voice dripping with irritation. "Can I switch seats?" The flight attendant blinked in surprise. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we're fully booked." Lisa scoffed. "I paid for first class to be comfortable, not to sit next to him." She gestured dismissively at Sergeant Harper. The flight attendant's cheeks flushed. "Ma'am, this gentleman has every right to sit here. Please be respectful." Sergeant Harper turned to Lisa and spoke in a calm, steady voice. "Ma'am, I assure you I won't be any bother to you. I'm just heading home after a long deployment." Lisa rolled her eyes. "Whatever," she muttered, crossing her arms. The rest of the flight was tense. Lisa made it clear she didn't want to engage with him. Whenever the flight attendant came by, she would speak loudly about how ridiculous it was to seat a common soldier next to someone like her. Other passengers whispered, some shaking their heads at her behavior. But Sergeant Harper didn't react. He simply stared out the window, lost in thought. The news that changed everything. The flight landed in Los Angeles late that night, and Lisa hurried off without so much as a glance at Sergeant Harper. She was eager to put the unpleasant experience behind her. The next morning, as she sipped her imported coffee, Lisa casually scrolled through the news on her phone. But then, her breath caught in her throat. The headline read, "American hero dies saving dozens in tragic explosion at LAX." Her hands trembled as she clicked the article. The story detailed how an off-duty soldier, Sergeant Daniel Harper, had spotted an unattended bag in the busy arrivals terminal. While others ignored it, he felt something was off. As he approached, he saw the wires. The bomb. Without hesitation, Sergeant Harper had shouted for people to get down and rushed toward the bag, shielding as many as he could. The explosion took his life instantly, but because of his quick actions, dozens were spared. Lisa's vision blurred. The same soldier she had insulted, belittled, and dismissed had been a hero. And she hadn't even said thank you. Her stomach twisted with guilt. The memory of her sharp words on the plane echoed in her mind. "Oh, great. I paid for first class to be comfortable, not to sit next to him." Tears streamed down her face. She read on. He had a wife, a young daughter. He had been coming home to surprise them. But instead, he had given his life to protect strangers, people like her. Lisa set her phone down, her hands shaking. Never in her life had she felt so ashamed. That night, she made a decision. She donated a large sum to a military charity in his name. She wrote a letter to his family, apologizing for how she had treated him. And for the first time in years, Lisa Thompson truly reflected on the person she had become. Because of a hero she had once looked down on, she vowed to change. And she never forgot Sergeant Daniel Harper, the man who had sacrificed everything, even for those who didn't deserve it. The moral of the story: respect should never be based on status, wealth, or appearances. True heroes walk among us, often unnoticed, yet they carry the weight of the world on their shoulders. Always treat others with kindness, because you never know the battles they're fighting or the sacrifices they are willing to make. A journey of redemption. The next few weeks were a blur for Lisa. She couldn't shake the image of Sergeant Harper from her mind. The guilt weighed on her like an anchor, dragging her down into a sea of regret. One evening, As she sat alone in her penthouse apartment, she picked up the letter she had written to Sergeant Harper's family but hadn't yet mailed. She read it again, her hands trembling. It wasn't enough. A simple apology wouldn't erase the way she had treated him. She needed to do more. After a restless night, Lisa made a decision. She booked a flight to Harper's hometown in Texas. Meeting the family. It was a quiet, sleepy town, so different from the bustling cities she was used to. As she walked through the streets, Lisa felt out of place in her designer heels and tailored coat. With her heart pounding, she arrived at a modest house with an American flag waving gently outside. She took a deep breath and knocked. The door opened to reveal a woman in her mid-30s, her eyes tired and swollen from grief. Lisa knew instantly, this was Harper's widow, Emily. "Can I help you?" Emily asked hesitantly. Lisa swallowed hard. "My name is Lisa Thompson. I was on the plane with your husband. I treated him terribly, and I need to say I'm sorry." Emily's eyes softened as she stepped aside. "Come in." Inside, the house was warm and welcoming, but Lisa could feel the weight of sorrow in the air. Toys were scattered across the floor, and a small girl with Harper's eyes sat playing quietly. Lisa's heart clenched. As they sat at the kitchen table, Lisa poured out everything. The way she had acted, the cruel words she had said, and how ashamed she felt. Tears welled in Emily's eyes, but she didn't look angry. Instead, she reached for Lisa's hand. "My husband never held grudges. If he were here, he'd tell you it's never too late to change." Lisa couldn't hold back her own tears. "I don't deserve forgiveness." Emily squeezed her hand. "Maybe not, but Daniel would have given it to you anyway. A new purpose." Lisa stayed in town for a few days, attending Harper's funeral alongside his family and friends. She listened to stories of his kindness, his courage, and his unwavering sense of duty. She realized that heroes didn't wear capes. They wore uniforms, carried burdens no one saw, and sacrificed for people who sometimes never even noticed. When she returned to New York, Lisa wasn't the same woman. She sold her luxury car and donated the money to military families. She volunteered at veteran support groups, offering her time, resources, and influence to make a difference. She never boarded another plane without remembering Sergeant Harper. And every time she saw a soldier, she made sure to shake their hand and say two simple words she had once been too blind to say. "Thank you." Final thought. Life has a way of teaching us lessons in the most unexpected ways. Lisa had spent years chasing wealth and status, but it took losing a hero to show her what truly mattered. Sometimes, a single moment can change everything. And sometimes, a single person can change a life forever. A legacy of honor. Years passed, but Lisa never forgot Sergeant Harper. His name became a guiding force in her life, a constant reminder of the man she had once dismissed, but who had ultimately transformed her. She established the Harper Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting veterans and their families. It provided financial aid, housing assistance, and mental health support for those who had sacrificed for their country. She used her business connections to secure jobs for veterans struggling to reintegrate into civilian life. Lisa personally attended every event, shaking hands with soldiers and their families, listening to their stories, and making sure their voices were heard. One day, at a fundraising gala for the foundation, she was approached by a young girl, Harper's daughter, Lily. Now a teenager, she held out a small, worn military patch. "My dad always carried this with him," Lily said, her voice soft but strong. "I think he'd want you to have it." Lisa's breath hitched as she took the patch, her fingers tracing the fabric. Her eyes met Lily's, filled with warmth and gratitude. "Thank you," Lisa whispered. "I'll carry it with me always." Full circle. Many years later, Lisa found herself boarding another plane. She settled into her first-class seat, feeling the familiar hum of the engines beneath her. As she glanced to her side, she saw a young soldier in uniform. He looked nervous, adjusting his seatbelt. Lisa smiled warmly. "First time flying?" she asked. He nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Lisa extended her hand. "I'm Lisa, and before anything else, let me say, thank you for your service." The soldier's eyes lit up with surprise and gratitude. They talked for most of the flight, and as they landed, Lisa handed him her business card. "If you ever need anything, career advice, financial help, even just someone to talk to, call me." The soldier looked down at the card, then back at Lisa. "Thank you, ma'am. That means a lot." As Lisa stepped off the plane, She touched the small military patch in her pocket, the one from Sergeant Harper. She knew now that some debts could never be repaid, but she would spend the rest of her life trying. Final message. Lisa's story is a reminder that change is always possible. Sometimes, it takes a painful lesson to open our eyes, but what matters is what we do afterward. Sergeant Harper didn't just save lives the day he died. He changed one forever. And in the end, that might have been his greatest legacy.